Welcome back, family. Today we're going to talk about the story of Cain and Abel. There's a lot of little nuances to that story, and so today we're going to kind of dive into it and maybe talk about it in a way that you've never heard before. So let's get started. Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. And Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord, from Yahweh. And she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Nothing wrong with either of those vocations. It's just that the story is being set up here for you. So obviously, the keeper of the sheep, there's metaphoric, terms. That's a metaphoric term there. And we know when we read the Bible that the sheep are symbolic of God's people, or Yah's people, I should say. I'm going to start using that term a little more often because that is the correct term. You don't say hallelujah God, you say hallelujah, right? So the keeper of the sheep is a symbolic representation, essentially, of the Messiah, the keeper of the sheep. And this story is a precursor to everything that's going to follow in the Bible, if you can see it. Okay, so let's continue in chapter 4, verse 3. And in process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord, unto Yahweh. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of the flock and of the fat thereof. And Yahweh had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Now, we have to wonder why. Number one, why are they bringing in an offering? What prompted them to say, hey, we need to bring an offering? They don't really tell you here. But once when you really look at the story and you understand the Moedim, the feasts of Yahweh, this Moedim was instituted at this time, and this was essentially the Passover. Now, if you understand what the prophecy was to the serpent, he said that he would be punished and that he would be forced to crawl on his belly, and that the seed of the woman, and that's very important, the seed of the woman, it doesn't say the seed of the man, and there's a reason for that. But we'll dig into it a little more. That the seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head, and the serpent would bruise his heel. So it's the seed of the woman, not the man. That should tell you that down the road, the seed of this woman, without the help of a man, will bring forth a child that would crush the serpent's head. It is very important to understand that, because it turns out there are at least three seeds. There's the seed of the serpent, and we can dig into that at some point. And then there's the seed of the woman, of which there is only one, at least one that we know about, right? And then there's a seed of man. So pretty much the majority, everybody's the seed of Adam, the seed of man. But the seed of the serpent, you have to ask yourself, okay, is this a spiritual or a metaphor, or what is that? And there's the seed of the woman, which we talked about. There's only one. And the seed of the serpent is interesting in that the seed of the serpent is both spiritual and physical, because the seed of the serpent, literally, the seed of the fallen ones, the watchers, and they talk about the watchers, these angels that were sent down to guide mankind, but started having ideas of their own. They wanted to be like the Most High, not overthrow the Most High. They can't do that. They know that. Only Hollywood produces movies that show the Satans as some equal and opposite force against the Most High. That's not even in their brains or spiritual minds, whatever. That's not a goal of theirs. They know they can't overthrow the Most High. What they're trying to do, they like the way the Most High rolls. They want to be like him. They want somebody to worship them. And here's man, right? So anyway, the serpent seed, or the watchers, the angels that were to guide men, ended up coming down and procreating with human women. They took on the form of men, which angels can do. And they procreated with human women, producing hybrids. And these hybrids were called Nephilim, right? And the Nephilim, King James translates that as giants. And again, we'll talk more about that at length. But there's a genetic marker there. So you had these giants, or Nephilim, who started replacing Yah's creation on earth, right? And so that's something Yah was not going to allow to happen. So basically, the flood was more designed to remove this abomination from the earth. And so he does, right? Anyway, yet they had procreated with human women, and that genetic marker propagated, so it still exists, right? And a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute, how if Yah destroyed all the Nephilim in the flood, how come there was giants in the time of David? Because of the genetic marker. There were 8 souls that survived that flood, because it said all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the air were destroyed. Didn't mess with the fish in the deep. And so a lot of people say, oh, there were underwater Nephilim. Well, no, that's not what it's saying. His job, remember, he's in control of everything that's going on. He lets it happen because it's free will, but he knows where it's going. He knows what's going to happen, and he has a plan. In fact, everything is going according to plan. We think we're controlling things. The fallen ones think they're controlling things, but no, everything is under control, right? In fact, the fallen ones already know they're toast. It's not even really anything they do at this point, and it's kind of out of spite, vindictiveness. If we can't have it, nobody can, and these men are not going to have it, then we're going to give them just enough. Remember, it was the fallen ones that talked Eve into, you need more knowledge. And then we see where this knowledge is gone. Tech knowledge, right? Because, well, we'll get to it, but that stone that Cain used to kill his brother was not good enough. There's too many men being born. Adam and Eve had like 9 children, I believe it was. And then they propagated. And remember, they're living a long time, so the species is propagating quickly. So one stone's not going to do it. We have to give man more knowledge, more understanding of war. And they start out with the teaching men the blows of death, right? And how to make swords and all sorts of good killing ways. But even that's not enough. Not enough people getting killed, basically. And the Nephilim said, we got to give them more knowledge, right? So I got off on the sons of God, the watchers thing a little bit. But what I want you to understand, that their goal is to destroy man by giving us the knowledge. And that theme is throughout the scriptures, because when the children of Israel were marching, they left Egypt, marching towards the promised land. When they get to Moab, Balak, king of Moab, called Balaam. He said, curse these people. And basically Balaam said, I cannot curse what God has blessed. But the era of Balaam, which they talk about in the book of the Revelation of Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ, right? It says that we can't curse them, but I will teach you how to get them to curse themselves. And that goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. As long as they had remained, if they had not eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they would have remained under Yah's protection, and they would have become what they were meant to become. So we'll dive more into that, but so here we are. So we're talking about Cain and Abel and the establishment of Passover. They don't say it, but they establish Passover at this point because they are told to bring a sacrifice. And I don't think it was that they didn't know what sacrifice to bring. I think the sin here is that Cain understood full well what sacrifice Yah was asking for, and he just didn't bring it. So why would Cain not do that? Well, remember the prophecy that the woman's seed would crush the serpent's head. Well, who was the firstborn? Cain. He was the woman's seed. Technically, he was not the woman's seed. He was Adam's seed because he's the one she procreated with. This prophecy was talking about something down the road, something more grand, right? But they didn't understand that, and they thought Cain, being born of woman, was the seed spoken of. And, of course, he probably, grew up thinking that. The one that would crush the serpent's head. And there's a certain arrogance that goes with that. So Yah establishes this offering that they had to bring. But the offering that he's asking them to bring is an offering denoting a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice. In other words, kind of telling everybody, no, Cain is not the one. There's one that shall come, and this will be a representation of the sacrifice he will have to do. So Cain, by not bringing the correct sacrifice, was in rebellion. He was sticking to, no, I'm the one. That's essentially what he's doing. Whereas Abel said, no, you're not the one. There's one to come, and I believe that. And he's going to have to, sacrifice himself, essentially, for the remission of sins to rescue mankind. He's the one that's going to crush the serpent's head, not you, brother. So Abel brings the correct sacrifice, a blood sacrifice. Cain does not bring a blood sacrifice. All of this information is packed into a couple of sentences, and people overlook it and misunderstand it, and they don't get it. So this is most probably Passover, the first one, because Yah commanded them, bring a sacrifice, bring an offering. They understood full well. Okay. Then it says in verse 5, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And Yahweh said unto Cain, why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. Rule over sin? I always pondered this sentence. It kind of messes me up a little bit. I got to admit that. But, well, and if anybody has a better explanation for this sentence of how Cain will rule over sin, or is it that sin shall rule over Cain? That seems like that makes more sense. And Cain talked with Abel, his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. So the Nephilim, the invisible seed, and I got to mention this too. So you saw the Nephilim DNA is propagated, but also after the flood, because the Nephilim were not Yah's creation, there was no place for their spirits. They weren't coming. Yah was not accepting them. So there's no place to go. So after their bodies died, they had to roam the earth. Right? So there's a physical seed, but there's also a spiritual seed. So when these Nephilim died, Their spiritual, whatever numbers there were of them, their spirits endured and are roaming the earth. And we call them demons. Demons are not angels, they are the sons of the angels. And they are in limbo because there's nowhere for them to go, so they wander the earth. And remember, they used to have humanoid bodies, and now they have no bodies, and they continuously seek a body to dwell in. That's called demon possession. So they will try to take possession of a human host. That's where all that comes from. And so Abel is being whispered to by these invisible forces who, by the way, like I said, their fathers taught men the strokes of death and war and chaos and all sorts of other things like makeup, how women can entice men. They taught them all these they taught men all these things. Anyway, so they get into Cain and say, and they work on his pride. So pride's a big deal because pride is like an open door. You got your front door, your garage door, and your back door. Well, it's like an open back door. And so Yah kind of allows that as an opening. And you can see it, how he works with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, in that Yah says, I hardened the heart of Pharaoh. And some people say, well, see, it wasn't Pharaoh's fault. Yah hardened his heart. You can't fight against Yah. He's the one that hardened Pharaoh's heart. No, what he did was he saw Pharaoh's back door was wide open, meaning sin. He had this pride problem, which could easily be exploited. And all Yah did was unchain, and there's plenty of excerpts in the Bible that talk about he's the one in charge of everything. He has these essentially ravenous dogs chained up in the yard that he knows because of their nature, if he lets them go, they will do what they do, which is tear and shred. These demonic forces, right? He's got them. He protects humans from them. But through sin, that sin allows them to access you. You curse yourself when you sin. So when you sin, you're essentially opening your back door, and you better not forget about it. Because, if you forget about your back door being wide open, that's akin to being turned over to a reprobate mind. You get to a point that you don't even realize your back door is wide open, and you're wondering, how are all these rabid dogs in my house? That's what happened. So anyway, so Cain's back door is wide open. He thought he was the Messiah. He was proud. His pride got to him, and Yah basically unleashed one of those. He unchained a particularly wicked spirit, I guess you would call it. And in the Book of Jubilees, they actually talk about this stuff. Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch, how this dynamic works. Because ultimately, Yah is responsible for good and bad. So how does he use the Satans? Well, literally, he just removes his protection, and then the Satans can get to you, right? As long as that's what they complain about Job. You've hedged him about. We can't get to him. And then Yah says, okay, I'm going to allow you to get to him, but you can't kill him, right? So he's in total control of everything. So to the believer, when tribulation comes, it's to make you stronger, right? Because it made Job stronger. But to the wicked, to those reprobate, he allows basically demon possession to your detriment, right? He did that to Pharaoh, right? So anyway, hopefully I'm not moving too fast and you can kind of understand what I'm saying. But there's both a spiritual and a physical component to the seed of the serpent. And so Cain rose up against his brother Abel and slew him. So Abel is now a type of Messiah. And so the story is playing out in real time. Everything that happened here is what's going to happen down the road with the true sacrifice. So Abel brought the true sacrifice, so he's symbolic of the true sacrifice. And then he's actually sacrificed by Cain, who's symbolic, who's essentially possessed at that moment by the Satans, their offspring, the evil offspring that do their bidding. The invisible spiritual Nephilim we call demons have possessed Cain's mind and stirred him up to rise up against his brother Abel and smite him with a stone and slew him. And Yahweh said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? I'm sure he kind of said the same thing like to the Satans after the crucifixion, right? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? So you can almost imagine, if you look at the cross, it said King David, and as he was prophesying, said, they railed on me with their mouths. He was talking about demonic forces. Well, it manifested in those pharisaical individuals who were at the cross saying he could heal others, but himself he cannot save, Those demons speaking through these people. Their back doors were open and they were possessed, and they were vehicles or vessels used to essentially kill the Messiah. But it was all allowed because it was all part of the plan, and the plan is spelled out here. Abel being the type of Messiah, Cain being a type of Satan, right? So, and Yahweh said unto Cain, where's thy brother Abel? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. So that blood that was shed at the cross essentially does the same thing. And then he says to Cain, and now thou art cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. So what that's also telling you, remember, this is a storyline. The whole story of the crucifixion is condensed here. And so he's now cursed from the earth. Remember the Messiah said, I beheld Satan fall as lightning. See, up to that point, the Satans had access to the throne of the Most High Yahweh, right? They could go before him, just like they did with Job, and converse with him. And then they talk about in the book of Jubilees, Mastema, again, could go before the throne of God and accuse Abraham. And we'll get into that at some point, but it was Mastema who accused Abraham, and he said, hey, yeah, he looks like a good guy, but he loves his son. I bet you he'd curse you to save his son. And Yah said, okay, go to it, right? And Abraham was told to sacrifice his son, and he didn't hesitate, right? But that was all Mastema. That was his doing. So he's one of the Satans, right? And so Abraham was about to sacrifice his son, but the angel stopped him and said, lo, there's a ram with his head caught in a thorny bush, a thicket. Hence the Messiah would be crowned with thorns. Get it? So anyway, everything is looking towards the Messiah. The whole book, all the scriptures point to the Messiah. And the book of Enoch talks about the Son of Man whose throne was next to the Most High. You understand the purpose of man here? That was something that everyone was confused about. Wait a minute. Is it Adam? Who's this man that sits on a throne next to the Most High? Who is this guy? But that's outside the 66 books of the Bible. But I encourage everybody to seek out more scripture, because it was the Romans that decided to kick those other books out. So the Romans essentially took control of the Hebrew scriptures, which were not theirs, but they took control of it, which was allowed to fulfill other prophecies we won't talk about here, but we'll continue. And now thou art cursed. Again, it's symbolic of Yah saying to the Satans at the cross, "You killed my son. You are now cursed." And they were summarily booted out and can no longer go back up before the throne of the Most High to accuse. So that was one of the things that came out of the cross. The Satans can no longer go before the throne of Yah to accuse men. They were booted out, lost access, and in the scriptures it said the dragon has come down to earth in fury and great wrath. Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. So this so-called war in heaven did not happen before, the creation, as all these theologians will try to tell you. The book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ, Yahushua HaMashiach, is about Christ and that time. So when they talk about the dragon waited for the child to be born, right? The woman was given birth, and the red dragon, red being symbolic of Edom, Edom means red. You understand that the Roman Empire is the kingdom of Edom, Jacob's brother. And there's a lot there's a lot of history behind that, and they try to hide that. That's what I'm saying. When the Romans got control of the Hebrew scriptures, there's a lot they didn't want people to know. But Edom means red. The dragon is red, and the dragon was ready to devour the child. Remember, Herod asked the three wise men, "Hey, where's this Messiah supposed to be born so I could worship him?" Right? He's speaking for the dragon. The voice of the dragon is coming out of Herod, who is descended of the people of Edom, who are descended from Esau, the brother of Jacob, who would always be the nemesis of Jacob. And now they're at the helm of the Roman Empire at the time of Christ. So anyway, but the Satans are cursed, right? Cain was cursed and kicked out. Satan was cursed and kicked out. That's why the Messiah said, "I beheld Satan fall as lightning," right? He's kicked out, right? So, let's see, verse 12, "When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth." He's talking to Cain, but he's really talking to the Satans. He's telling them, you are now bound to the earth, or you will be once you do this deed. And I don't think the Satans realized Yah was talking to them. He's in a sense subtly telling the story without, how parables are stories that are told so that the general public doesn't understand what you're talking about. I remember in the church they used to tell us parables were told to make the story seem more clear. No, it's the opposite. He said so that seeing they would see, or seeing they would see and not perceive, and hearing they would hear and not understand. That's what a parable is for. So this is kind of a parable, but it's a parable written so that the Satans would not understand the plan, right? But everything that's happening to Cain would happen to the fallen ones, right? So it's telling two stories at one time. And Cain said unto Yahweh, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face. And from thy face I be hidden, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth." That's what the Satans are now. "And it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me." And Yahweh said unto him, "Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him," because Yah had a plan for Cain, just like he has a plan for the Satans. They're going to fulfill a certain will. They're almost like school teachers for the Kodashim, for the chosen ones. You have to be able to overcome them. You're lifting weights to build muscle, right? That's what this is all about. And so he will not destroy them in a weird sense, he's protecting them so that they can fulfill their portion. And their portion is to build strength and character in the believers. And Cain went out from the presence of Yahweh and dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden. And just remember, for all those who go, well, who did Cain marry? How did he have kids? Well, he married his sister. If you read outside the 66 books of the Bible, they clearly tell you who his wife was, just like they clearly tell you who Seth's wife was. They had to marry their siblings. And I believe Cain's wife was Awan, the first daughter Eve begat. And I think the second daughter was Azura, and she ended up marrying Seth. And so the lines continue, and they show you how the lines propagate from that. But anyway, I'm going to end it on that note. We're here in verse 16. I'm going to end it here. And understand that, this was the first Passover. I know a lot of people might, well, there's no proof of that. I'm like, when you understand the purpose of everything that went on here, this is talking about the sacrifice that's going to have to be made. And this sacrifice, they understood, all the patriarchs understood to make this sacrifice. And it turns out it's in the 14th day of the first month, right? And then that propagated on. Then the children down the road, the children of Israel are taken into captivity in Egypt and enslaved. They forgot all their ways. And then Moses, the deliverer, comes and brings them out of Egypt. And everybody thinks Moses was making up some new stuff. No. You're going to find out Abraham and Noah, everybody used to keep these feasts. And all Moses did was reinstitute them. And as a reminder, all human beings, Gentiles included, come out of Noah. So there was a point in time where even the Gentiles were doing these sacrifices and observing these feasts. Everybody was. It's just that everybody went astray. But Yah said, this particular group, Abraham and his crew, they are my inheritance. I got control of them. I will allow the other angels to take the nations and teach them and look over them. But I got this group. And so this group was the only group that kept in the way, right? And he ensured that they kept in the way, but through Moses. So anyway, like I said, we'll end it on that note. And hopefully this wasn't overkill. You understood what I was saying. And I'll see you on the next video. Hopefully you're learning something. God bless. Or Yah bless. My bad. Yah bless.
Today, I'm diving deep into the story of Cain and Abel to uncover what really went down. Can I find the hidden lessons and truths behind this ancient tale? The story of Cain and Abel is one of the most well-known biblical tales, and for good reason. It's a story that has captivated audiences for centuries, and its themes are still relevant today. At its core, the story is about two brothers, Cain and Abel, who offer sacrifices to God. Cain, a farmer, offers grain, while Abel, a shepherd, offers meat. God favors Abel's offering, and Cain becomes jealous. This jealousy festers, and Cain's anger towards Abel grows. God warns Cain that he's on the verge of doing something terrible, but Cain doesn't listen. His jealousy and anger ultimately lead him to commit a horrific act. The cultural and historical contexts surrounding the story are fascinating. The tale is set in a time when agriculture was just beginning to emerge, and the contrast between Cain's and Abel's offerings represents the shift from a nomadic to a settled way of life. The story has had a profound impact on religious and philosophical thought. It raises questions about morality, free will, and the nature of evil. Many have interpreted the tale as a cautionary story about the dangers of unchecked emotions. The pivotal moment when Cain's jealousy drives him to commit an unforgivable act is a turning point in the story. It's a moment that illustrates the darker sides of human emotions and serves as a reminder of the devastating consequences of allowing jealousy and anger to consume us. The story also highlights the concept of choice and how our decisions have consequences. Cain's choice to let his jealousy get the better of him leads to tragedy, while Abel's choice to continue being faithful to God ultimately costs him his life. In examining the story's relevance to contemporary discussions about morality and human relationships, it becomes clear that the themes are timeless. The tale encourages us to reflect on our own emotions and actions, and to consider the impact they may have on those around us. So, what can we learn from the story of Cain and Abel? The key insights are clear: jealousy and unchecked emotions can lead to devastating consequences, and our choices have a profound impact on ourselves and those around us. If you've got your own take on the story of Cain and Abel, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Don't forget to check out my other videos for more intriguing biblical stories.
Coloring Book for Kids, Volume 2. Available August 15, 2025 on Amazon. The Bible Lions Coloring Book for Children. Color 30 fun designs of inspirational verses and Christian artwork. A beautiful children's coloring book designed to fill your child's mind with the positive words of God's love. The Bible Lions Coloring Book for Kids was designed to be a fun, yet effective way to help children calm their tension. Hand-lettered quotes and adorable hand-designed illustrations will inspire your child as they reflect on God's promises.